Hello there. Welcome to another midweek meditation. I am Reverend Devin, and this is a weekly meditation that I do for my churches in Hyde Park, Bakersfield, and Jeffersonville, Vermont. This is also a meditation that I do for anybody who's joining in over YouTube and is looking to nurture a progressive faith. If you're looking for a second opinion on how we can build up a loving faith within our lives, I hope that you like and subscribe, and please feel free to share these videos with anybody you feel called to. Hello, brothers and sisters. Today is the week of Transfiguration Sunday. This is a time where we within the Christian tradition celebrate the transformational power of the Holy Spirit. And so today we have a reading from Matthew, and it's all about change. And so let's read it, and then I'll talk about it. Our reading for today comes from Matthew 17, verses 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, talking to him, Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, This is my Son, the beloved, with him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. So, this week is Transfiguration Sunday. And the reading that we have from Matthew really is a story that we repeat every single year around this time. This is the Sunday that precedes Lent, Ash Wednesday, where I get to doodle on people's foreheads. One of the highlights of my year. And this is also a time where we reflect on the way in which the Holy Spirit can change us. Another interesting note, this is the anniversary of when I did my first sermon. But anyways, Transfiguration Sunday really is about the transformational power of the Holy Spirit. This story about Jesus going up the mountain with his disciples and meeting Moses and Elijah, and then having God blessing him, and the entire your face is shining thing is really meant to show that when we commit ourselves to a path of love, it is able to change us into a person that is blessed by God. I think that there are many ways in which we could tell this story, but this is the way in which the authors of the gospel chose to throw it our way. And so it's sort of up to us as people of faith to sort of try to apply this to our everyday lives. And I think that in a lot of ways this story does speak to the way in which we try to be good people within the world, and how God and Christ can serve as a guide to help us do that. Lent, in a lot of ways, is a time that not too many Christians are excited about, because I think that there is a perception about Lent that it is a time where we fast, where we do things that make us miserable, and we basically just bear with it until Easter. And I think that really does miss the point. It really misses the target of what Lent is trying to go for. It's trying to prepare us for the celebration of Jesus' resurrection by giving us an opportunity to celebrate the transformational power of Jesus' ministry. Jesus going up a mountain with his friends, in a lot of ways, I feel is symbolic, because trying to make positive change in the world is, in a lot of ways, like going up a steep mountain. And Jesus meeting with Moses and Elijah, I also think, are symbolic, because they represent, in a lot of ways, the teachers that came before us. And Jesus getting the blessing of God and having his face or body shine, in a lot of ways, I feel, again, are symbolic. They show that when we put in that effort, when we work with our friends, when we work with our mentors, when we work on ourselves, we turn into people who are blessed by God. And so, did this actually happen? I don't think that that's relevant when it comes to this particular story, because I think that this is a story of faith. And at the end of the day, it's a story about how if we allow ourselves to be led by our faith in God's love, then that faith can make real world changes that are positive and good and loving. And so that's what I feel Lent is about. That's the reason why we honor the Transfiguration right before Lent, because that's what we want to get out of these 40 days that are coming up. You know, it's not about giving up Snickers or donuts or coffee for 40 days. It's not about eating fish or making yourself miserable for 40 days. It's not about, starting a tough exercise routine that you're going to stop the second that you're done doing Lent. It's about encouraging ourselves and the people in our lives to do the things that we know we should be doing in order to grow as individuals within this world. I think that we also often make the mistake of trying to do Lent alone, trying to change ourselves alone. And that also misses the point, because Lent is a community activity. It's a lot easier to make positive change when you have somebody who's either helping you along the way, helping you up the mountain, or on the sidelines cheering you on. So when I look at this passage, I think that it's easy for us to sort of dismiss it as just a superhero story. Jesus climbs up a mountain. He meets the ghosts of Moses and Elijah. He glows like some superhero, and God casts down beams of holy light upon him. And, it's hard. And I get it. It's hard to take that type of story seriously. But I do think that it is the message of faith here that applies to our everyday lives. It's not that Jesus glowed. It's that Jesus put in the effort to become a glowing person of love. And are we ourselves willing to do that in order to be blessed by God that way? I mean, look at how our world is struggling with climate change. We know that we should be making changes to our economy, to our societies, that allow for us to live in more harmonious union with the earth. But we don't do it. And a lot of the reasons we don't do it is because it's just inconvenient. I was listening to my local select board, and they were talking about whether or not they wanted to adopt a statement to their bylaws about being a racially inclusive institution, basically supporting diversity within the community. And they chose not to do that because I think, again, here in Vermont, we find that a lot of folks don't have to deal with diversity that much. Most people here in Vermont are white, especially in the town that I live in. What really was encouraging to me was there was one woman who was listening to the meeting, and she chose to speak up, and she said, look, you are choosing not to adopt this bylaws, not to do anything about this, because it's inconvenient to you by ignoring the needs of people of color within the state of Vermont. We only are perpetuating the problems. And I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to tip my hat to her because she's right. When we choose to ignore our problems, we are perpetuating the problems of the world. And Lent is about recognizing the problems that we can fix in our lives. Are we going to be the type of people who are like, we can deal with climate change, yes, we can deal with climate change tomorrow? Are we going to be the type of people who are like, well, I don't see a problem with systemic racism in my life, so I just don't want to pay attention to it? Are we going to be the type of people who are like, well, yeah, there's gun violence going on all over the place, but it's not happening in my schools, so tough. that's the type of attitude that Jesus encourages us to avoid. Jesus encourages us to action. Jesus encourages us to climb mountains, not alone, but with those who are willing to support us as a community of people who are dedicated to God's love, so that God can love us better. And so that is what these 40 days are all about. It's not a curse, it's a gift. It's an opportunity for us to grow and become the type of people that God knows we can be, that we were created to be. I do truly believe that each and every one of our lives here on this earth have the potential to be a priceless blessing to this existence, to everybody that we meet, if we are willing to put the effort into being the type of good people that God knows that we can be. And often the biggest challenge to us doing that is ourselves. And so as we go into this season of Lent, I pray that it's not a burden, but a blessing for you. And maybe you'll take on one of those Lenten tasks. It's not necessarily dieting, exercise, or eating sardines. A lot of times, Lent is just about a little bit of self-reflection and asking yourself, well, what can I do to be a force for good in my life here and now? Peace.